Hi, Randall Goosby.
Hi, Miss Joe. How are you?
I'm always so happy to see you.
Oh, likewise.
So, thank you for doing this interview for Chesapeake Chamber Music, our first Rising Stars project that's going to be aired in February. We're really glad that you're going to be performing for us and delighted that you are also here to speak with me with some questions that we have from our audience members.
Of course, it's a pleasure. It was so much fun to record, and it's a pleasure to contribute to a festival that one of my biggest mentors is co-director of. So thank you for the opportunity, really.
So, Randall, where are you speaking to us from today?
I am speaking to you from a subletted apartment that I'm staying in on the Upper West Side.
Mhm.
Yeah, and this will be my temporary permanent location until the summer when the sublet is up, and we'll have to figure out what the fall looks like, what the summer looks like before that, I guess.
Well, I'm in Brooklyn in Bay Ridge in my home, so we're not that far away from each other, which I don't know, warms my heart. And so I guess the first question I have to ask you is, and many different people were wondering about this, is who inspired your love of music?
um, many people, but I would have to say number one is probably my mother. Um, she certainly inspired the um, my motivation to start the violin,
Mhm.
and I loved it. I don't think I needed any help loving it at a very young age. Thankfully, it wasn't until I was 12 or 13 and I realized that I had to start practicing hours and hours a day that love was tested. But my mother was always there to reinforce that love, so to speak. So I guess she would be top of the list.
And how did your mother come to have such a passion for music?
Through me, actually. It's a funny story the way that I started, and you know this, but I'll rehash it for the audience. Um, my mother grew up in Japan and is Korean by blood, and in Asia, well, really everywhere else in the world, music education for kids at a young age and in schools in a standardized fashion is standard. Everyone has that chance and that opportunity to learn to express themselves through an instrument, which my mother highly valued. She played piano and sang and danced as a child and growing up, and she wanted to make sure that myself and my two younger siblings had the same opportunities to express ourselves that way. So she asked the three of us what instrument we wanted to play. We had a choice, and both of my younger siblings chose piano, and of course, because I just had to be, the oddball, I chose violin. And I didn't know any more about violin than my mother did at that point. We didn't know where to get an instrument. We didn't really know what it meant to play the violin and practice and have lessons and all of that. Um, so we pretty much learned all about the violin and the violin world, the technique, all of the world-renowned players, and really the culture behind what it is to play a stringed instrument together. I mean, we discovered Mr. Perlman together, his recordings and documentaries in which he appeared. We sort of figured out how to practice well together. I mean, she practiced side by side in the same room with me until I was a teenager. So she was with me for every step of the journey, and I would say that she probably knows just as much as I do about how it's supposed to sound, how it's supposed to work, and all of the ins and outs.
It's so important to have that level of care and support, isn't it, from an early age, um,
Absolutely.
as a musician? So I'm so grateful that you had that, and I know your mother fairly well, and she's really a special human being, that's for sure, with a really generous heart, right, and a
Absolutely.
bright spirit. So you were lucky to have someone like her in your life.
Oh, I know. I know. She won't forget it either.
Now, I guess if you were to start over, is there another instrument that you would have chosen?
I've given this some thought. Um, I would probably say cello, just because some of my favorite moments on violin happen on the G string, the deepest, richest perhaps the most vibrant, vibrating string. And I think all of the strings on a cello fit that fit that mold. And I think, there's just some absolutely gorgeous repertoire for the cello. Um, but in trying to imagine what I would look like playing the cello, it's difficult. I can't see myself with a cello between my legs. So if I were to have, maybe a second choice, I might play piano, which I actually started on, but was not very good at. I played piano for like 3 months before my self-confidence started to wane. And I just felt like I couldn't do it. And that's what really pushed my mom, I think, to go after the violin for me. But I think the piano is just such a beautifully versatile instrument. I might even gravitate more towards jazz piano than classical if I had another shot at it from day one. I just am such a big fan of Oscar Peterson and Bill Evans and all of these jazz giants and what they were able to do on the keys. And I've always wished I could do it, but all of my years of secondary piano and Juilliard were very humbling. I'll say that.
Oh, I hear you. I feel the same way. I really wish I could do that, what Oscar Peterson can do. He's so fluid and electrifying piano. Well, since you are playing the violin, can you tell our audience a little bit about the particular instrument that you're playing on right now?
Yes, this is an instrument that I've had for a couple of years now. It is a Guarneri del Gesù from the Stradivari Society in Chicago. It was made in 1735, and it's nicknamed the Sennhauser. And I think that it got that name just because it was sold to a man named Sennhauser at some point in the 1900s. There's little that's known, I think, about its earlier history. Which I wish I knew more about. I think it's so fascinating that these instruments have walked this earth, so to speak, for literally hundreds of years. And, I can't imagine the places that it's been and the people that it's seen and just the history behind it. But it's a very, very special instrument. For years, actually, I was sort of searching for an instrument that had a certain sweetness and sensitivity, but also that depth and richness and projection that's needed, to really fill a concert hall, which is what I've always aspired to do. And this instrument really fits the bill. I mean, it's so versatile and responsive, and at the same time, it's so complex. I mean, I've had it for 2 years, and I think I could probably spend the next couple of decades of my life really learning how best to play this instrument, what it responds to the best. Because I think, as old as it is and as temperamental as it is, I think it does learn to work with whatever the player does, whatever habits and tendencies the player brings to the instrument. So I have to be careful with the way that I practice and the way that I shape everything, basically, so that the violin is able to reach its fullest potential, and as am I. It's really a sort of otherworldly kind of symbiotic relationship. It's just so much fun.
So you would say that the instrument that you play does make a big impact on you as a person, as a musician, but also on your way of playing?
Certainly, I think so. I mean, I think I've had the privilege of playing on a number of really fine instruments, and this is, I would probably say, is the best, if you can quantify that somehow, the best instrument that I've had a chance to play on. And looking back on how I felt physically with my hands around a violin, and emotionally what I felt was necessary to give to the instrument, it's always changing. I mean, instrument to instrument, but even with the same instrument, I think over time, as you as a person grow and as your experiences continue to sort of mold how you approach the instrument, I think the instrument, a really great instrument like this one, really will respond to that. And it's really been a great experience to see and feel that, and to know that hopefully, as long as I have it, that will continue to be, the trajectory of our journey together.
Well, I feel very lucky to have been a part of that as an observer over the years since I met you as a teenager, and watching this incredible talent continue to blossom and flourish and thrive and deepen. I mean, when I first met you, I always thought you seemed so much wiser and older than your years, and that continues to stay true as you grow into this, magnificent adult. Um, so I've enjoyed having this long partnership with you. I guess it's been about 10 years. Is that right? Has it been about
Yeah,
10
yeah.
years that we've known each
A
other?
little over 10 years by this point. Yeah, likewise. I mean, it's been a thrill. It's been a pleasure, and I can't wait for many, many more years to come of bouncing ideas back and forth, frantically emailing you with questions out of the blue. So thank you for being there.
Oh, I'm always delighted to hear from you, Randall. And then, I always check in with you too. It's like, how are you? What are you doing? How are you doing? And it's a wonderful part of life having you in it, Randall.
Likewise.
So you can tell us a little bit more about some of the other key mentors in your life. And actually, you met first at the Promo Music program. Can you share with our audience a little bit more about your relationship with PMP?
Absolutely. I would probably credit PMP as the single most important sort of turning point in my life, which is weird because that happened when I was 14. I guess halfway through what is now my life, and at the time, I had been making some pretty consistent progress considering the circumstances. I was studying in New York City with Philippe Quint, has been one of my biggest mentors and supporters, and he generously agreed to find time in his performing schedule at the time. This must have been 2009, 2010, something like that. And we arranged for my mother and I to fly once a month from Memphis, where we lived at the time, to New York City to have 6 hours of lessons over one weekend in that month. So we would fly up on a Saturday or maybe a Friday night so I could rest. And then we'd have a 3-hour lesson with Philippe on Saturday. I'd go to the hotel and practice and look at the recordings and the notes that my mother took, go back on Sunday, have another 3-hour lesson, and go home. And I would have to sort of retain everything that we covered in those 6 hours throughout the next month until we were able to come back. And it was working. It was actually working, and we were seeing a great amount of progress. I was feeling pretty good for the first couple of years. And in our third and last year of working together, it sort of started to stagnate and plateau, and we all felt it. As a young kid who I didn't know what I was getting myself into at that point. I just kind of went with the flow. I went to the lessons, I practiced, I looked at the notes or didn't. And, there came a point when I was playing, I can't remember what it was, in a lesson with Philippe, and before he gave me any comments or any criticisms, he kind of just stopped for a second and looked at me and he asked, "Do you really want to do this? Is this something that you can see yourself doing for the rest of your life? Do you, can you picture that?" And I had no idea what to say. I had never thought about it. In my mind, I didn't necessarily ask to be in that situation. I didn't ask for all of the travel and all of the hours and hours of lessons and practice. And I think in my uncertainty, Philippe, having known about the Perlman program and what the Perlmans have done for so many young musicians, he figured, hey, if there's anybody who can inspire you and give you some direction going forward, it's probably that guy. It's probably Itzhak Perlman and his wife Toby. So I applied for the program and was extremely surprised to have been accepted, and I went there for my first time in 2011. And considering the plateau that I was coming out of, and this sort of questioning as to whether or not this was for me, those questions melted away within a week at PMP. It was my first time really having been truly surrounded by other musicians who are my age, some slightly older, who are just, in my eyes back then and even now looking back, were world class talents and musicians and really artists. At such a young age, I was shocked. And every time we had a whip, one of our work in progress concerts, student recitals, I always remember my jaw just being on the floor. I mean, concert etiquette probably wasn't my forte back then. I remember raucously applauding between movements, not knowing that it was, I was just so thrilled, and it was so inspiring, to have made so many great friends looking back in that first summer and every summer. After that, to share recordings with and to just nerd out over any old thing in relation to music. That was the point when I was like, okay, yeah, what else am I going to do? What else could possibly fill me up like this? So PMP was that for me. That was my real kind of light bulb moment. And, obviously it almost goes without saying, but having, none other than Itzhak Perlman as a close mentor, and I might almost consider him a friend at this point. It feels weird to say about such an iconic person and artist, just a giant in our field, but he's done so much for me, and has taught me so much, not really just about playing the instrument, but what it means to live in this music and to really allow it to affect you in a way that allows you to affect those who listen to you, and to be a vessel for the deeper meaning behind this music and what the composer was feeling and was intending with the music. And an equally big part of my experience at PMP was meeting you, of course, and our lessons together. I remember, I don't remember what we were playing. I don't remember. It was my first summer, though. I remember having a lesson with you. And people use the phrase mind blown a lot. Like my mind was totally blown. I thought you were some kind of wizard or some kind of magician who just knew exactly what to say, how to say it, in exactly what way to every student, and took into account the very different circumstances and the very different experiences that each student had lived up until that point when they found themselves in that studio with you, and just knew exactly what to say and how to say it to really transform whatever it was that you were getting at. And I was just floored. I couldn't believe it. And in the 10 plus years that we've been studying together, I still can't believe it. I don't know how you do it. And you've been a guiding light, really, in my progression as an artist, but also as a person, and trying to be as conscious as possible and make choices of integrity, both on the instrument and outside of it. And like we said, it's been 10 years, and I hope that it's going to be another 50 of me just being able to lean on you and bounce questions off of you, and just seek your never-ending wisdom and guidance. It really has it's been life-changing, and I look forward to so much more time together and so much more conversation. But yeah, PMP, you, Mr. Perlman, all of the students that I met there, just inspiring is a super broad umbrella term, but that's what it was.
Oh, shucks, you're going to make me cry. Okay. Well, you were one of those people, that caused quite a stir. I remember that summer with the jaws being on the floor. It's like, who is this person here who has so much to say at such an early age? Who is he? It was very striking.
I thought I was just a troublemaker, honestly.
You had and have a lot of character, and that is only a good thing, Randall.
Leave it at that.
Well, you mentioned, geeking out over recordings, which we do a lot at PMP. And I know this is a very tricky question, but I'm going to ask it. Anyway, if you had to choose one piece of music that you would take to a desert island today, what would be your choice and why?
It's a tough question.
It is, I know.
Honestly, I feel like my answer to this question has been the same over the past, I don't know how many years. And I really wanted to change it up, but the same movement comes to mind, and it's Beethoven's Cavatina from Opus 130. I listened to it so much after that first couple of summers at PMP. Every time I cried. And I was never one, for example, I still don't really cry in movies. If something's sad or a movie is really sad, I don't cry. And I generally don't really cry, because of musical performances or recordings either. Sometimes it might just be that I'm so excited, like tears come to my eyes. But this piece, I put it on repeat every time I got on a plane to fly to New York, and it was a 2-hour flight, and I would just listen to the Cavatina the whole way through. And I would just discover something new, a new note, a new color, a new texture. every time I listen to it through. And I guess in the past few years, I actually almost never listen to it because I feel that it's just kind of that special. I don't really want it to be a kind of leave it on repeat kind of a piece. So, for example, if I took it with me to a desert island, I don't think I would play it every day. I don't think I would listen to it every day. I think I would really, um, I want to save it and savor it for those special moments where I really need it.
Mm-hmm.
I need, um, I need that emotional depth that Beethoven somehow put into that music. I could talk about it forever, so I'll just leave it at that. I'll leave it with the Beethoven Cavatina.
Fantastic choice. I mean, it does bore deeply into your soul, right? When you
Too
listen to
deeply
it.
sometimes, almost.
Well, okay, so that takes me to our next question from our audience, which is we've talked a lot about emotional vulnerability, and I think music like that does touch a very central part of your most vulnerable elements in your soul. And how does this, I should say, guide you, or does it dictate your choice of repertoire or of programs? How does emotional vulnerability play into some of your choices?
At this point, I feel like I want to be as vulnerable as I can be, no matter what I play. Some pieces are a little bit more conducive to that, such as the Cavatina, um, something like um, something like the Strauss Sonata, which I played last concert season for my debut recitals with YCA. And, some of these pieces are by nature very emotive, kind of hard on the sleeve kind of thing. But for that reason, it's almost easier to hide behind that and to just allow the music to do that, as opposed to trying to bring those feelings and those emotions into your own heart and soul as you play this music. And I think really, being able to succumb to your emotions and to your feelings about this music and what the music means to you is how we connect with audiences. There is beautiful music, but it's not beautiful music until you play it beautifully. you know and I think in order to do that, you have to really be in touch with your feelings as a person, as a human being. And by doing that, you can then maybe be a little bit more empathetic to what the composer might have been feeling and thinking, as they were putting pen to paper and making this music tangible in a way. But I think that's one of the things that makes this art so fun, and so rewarding and so gratifying, is that you can, in being emotionally vulnerable, as we're talking about, and not only wearing your heart on your sleeve, but your soul and your feelings on your sleeve. People can relate to that because everybody as a human being feels some degree of the same things throughout their lives, I think. And I'm young, I'm 24. There are things that I probably have not felt yet as a human. But I think that there's a pretty good chance that a piece of music is the thing that's going to bring those feelings out for the first time. And if not, if it happens to be some sort of life experience outside of music, all the better, because before you ever even play that piece of music, you already sort of know what it's about in a way. So it's a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun and it's a fun challenge, really, to open yourself up like that. In the same way as how you may not open up that quickly to a person. It may take some time for a piece to really bring that out of you. But I think that's part of the process, and that's part of the reason why this is a lifelong pursuit. There is no such thing, the way that I see it, as mastering this instrument or mastering this music. I think it's constantly evolving and changing with us as people. So I guess that's kind of long-winded way of answering your question, but yeah, that's one of the greatest joys, I think, of playing this instrument and playing this music.
Beautifully and sincerely said. You're finding beauty in the search for the truth and always seeking. Oh, that's beautiful. Um, so we have a question here on a slightly different topic about your passion for community engagement. And if you could tell us a little bit more about projects that you've been involved with, notably in schools? Who or what has inspired you to take on these activities in the course of your life? That would be so interesting to all of us.
Absolutely. Well, it all sort of started with my participation in the Sphinx competition in 2010. I participated in the junior division of the competition, and I was fortunate enough to take home the first prize. And I was 13 at the time. If you or any of you watching have seen pictures of me when I was 13, I look like I could have passed for 8 years old or 9. I had a real baby face. I think I probably still do. But as a part of the prize package, if you will, for winning the competition, you get to play with Sphinx's partner orchestras around the country for a year.
Mhm.
And as a part of every performance, pretty much every performance opportunity, there were a couple of days before the actual performance where I would have the opportunity to go into schools in the area, particularly schools that are made up of primarily students of color and students of less privileged backgrounds. And I was always nervous. I was more nervous for these performances than I ever was to get in a suit and go on stage. And that was because at the time, I had accepted that violin was not really like the cool mainstream thing to do, but I was fine with that. And I could live in that, my own little bubble. And then when I went into these schools, these were kids who could easily have been my friends. These were kids, who were my age. They looked like me, probably had some of the same interests outside of violin. But in my mind, I was like, man, some of these kids like have mustaches. Some of these kids are like grown adults. What could I possibly have that would be of interest of them? I would just go on stage and tell a little bit about my story and how I got to be doing what I'm doing. And then I played something. It was usually a Paganini Caprice or Bach Prelude or something. And I never knew what the response was going to be. Every single time, I was pleasantly surprised. I mean, I thought I was looking out at myself at PMP, draws on the floor, kids really just floored. And I didn't understand it for the first couple of times, but then I realized, I was like, it's not that these kids have any inherent distaste for this music. I think it's just that they've never heard it before. They've never heard it before, let alone having seen someone who looks like them do it in front of them, in front of their eyes live. And that was a really inspiring point in my life that came around the same time as when I started at PMP. And I think over the years, my passion for just opening the eyes and the ears of young people to this music and, the joys and the riches that it can bring to one's life is so, so important to me. I consider myself lucky to have had the opportunities that I've had to get involved in this art form. And I think it's really shaped who I am as a person. It's shaped who I interact with. It's shaped how I interact with them. And I'm just grateful. I'm grateful for all that I've, all the people I've come in contact with and all the opportunities that I've been afforded. And I want to show, the next generation of young people coming up now that they can do this too. I mean, it doesn't have to be this. They can do whatever they want. But I don't want many more young people to be growing up without the knowledge that this is a field, this is a pursuit that they can take on and that they can succeed in. So that's been a huge focus of mine and will continue to be a primary focus going forward. As far as projects that I've been involved in, obviously recently with COVID, it's been a little bit challenging to connect with kids in this way, especially in person. But actually very recently I started a virtual studio class series with an organization called UK Music Masters, formerly known as London Music Masters. And I was named their inaugural Roby Artist Fellow after Victoria and Simon Roby, who are huge contributors to the arts scene there in London. And had we not had to deal with a worldwide pandemic, I would have made several trips over there to London and I would have visited primary schools around the UK, and I would have had a chance to work in person, face to face, hand in hand with kids in these schools. And I recently had a chance to go online and go work with them virtually in a studio class format, very much modeled after your studio class, which I've been so fortunate to be a part of. And it's been so great to see the kids we only had one meeting so far, but some of the teachers of the students were saying, oh, she may be a little shy, or it may take a little while to open up. But as soon as these kids got in front of a computer and saw all these other kids, they piped up, and they, big smiles on their faces. And I was asking them what their favorite foods were, and everybody was so excited. And not only that, my main focus for that class is to have the students learn to interact with each other around this music, and support each other in terms of giving feedback, whether it be positive or whether it be constructive. And that was the part I was worried about, because for me, in your studio class, I was always intimidated as a young kid, hearing all of these astute, really well articulated comments about the very deepest nature of whatever the music was. And so I was worried that the kids might be afraid to speak up. But as soon as I said, hey, who's played this piece before? 3 or 4 hands go up, and I call in each one of them, and they all have comments. And it's so inspiring. It's so inspiring to see that kind of joy and that excitement and interest, not only in the music, but in the interest of interacting and helping one another, which was huge in my development. Another organization, which I actually, unfortunately, am not as closely affiliated with anymore due to a number of factors, is the Opportunity Music Project. It's based here in New York. Jessica Garand, who is a alumni of Juilliard, actually started this program, and it basically puts instruments in the hands of kids from low-income families throughout the 5 boroughs of New York City. And they're offered free and low-cost instruction, instrument maintenance, mentoring, orchestra experience. And that was my first real private teaching, one-on-one experience. And it was just huge. I never thought of myself, and I still honestly don't really think of myself as a teacher, certainly not as a pedagogue like yourself. But, being able to have a consistent interaction with the students and being able to be a part of their life in a way that enforces some of the life skills that I find so valuable, as a result of learning an instrument, was so fulfilling and gratifying. And I still keep in touch with some of my former students. But I really look forward to the opportunity to continue working with young people, and really with those who are a part of a demographic who you might not often find at a concert hall today, or even pre-COVID. The fabric of the world, really, but I think the fabric of classical music is going to have to change, and is going to have to keep up with the times, so to speak. And I feel fortunate to be sort of entering into this career at such a vital time, I think, for the industry, making it more accessible to more people, and more young people, and more young people of color. Just inviting as many people in, and not making it quite as exclusive as it may have been in the past, is really one of the cornerstones of what I want to do as a person, not just as an artist and a musician. So that's a bit about my sort of community engagement experience, and it's really gratifying work. That's about as well as I can sum it up. And I just hope to be able to do more and more of that kind of work, and to be able to make it more accessible and more meaningful to those who I'm able to reach with it.
I have no doubt that that is what's going to happen, because you have all the facets of being a very important and meaningful leader, not just in the arts, but I think in our world and in society in so many different ways. And so I'm extremely proud of you for walking that path consistently and continuously, and with great joy and passion. So thank you for doing that, Randall.
Thank you. Thank you for the guidance, as always.
So I think you answered a couple of other questions that we had on our plate here about tips that you would have for students who are trying to learn on Zoom right now, and how the pandemic has affected your life. Could you tell us maybe some advice that you would have for some of the young people who might be struggling with this lack of in-person connection that has been going on for almost a year now, and probably for upcoming months? I would love to know any thoughts that you would have to share about that.
That's a tough question. That's a really tough question, because I'm so lucky to have a teacher like you who makes this virtual setup seem fine. I feel like I'm still learning a great deal, and I leave every lesson, closing my laptop and feeling like, okay, yeah, I know what to do next. And so I don't know exactly what it feels like to not have that feeling. But to those who are having difficulty with the online setup, I would just say, use it to your advantage. Use it to stay connected, not only to your teachers but to your friends as well. Play for each other on Zoom. Have listening parties and listen to recordings or something on Zoom the way that we would, at PMP. I think connection is at the very heart of what we do as musicians, and that's part of the reason why this time has been so difficult for so many, because that defining factor is gone almost. And so we have to figure out ways to keep that connection alive. And although it may not be as meaningful and as fulfilling on a computer and looking at people's faces in a small square on a screen, it's something. It's something. And some of the most inspiring times I've had actually during COVID were during the Perlman Music Program chamber music workshops, virtual sessions that they held this past summer in 2020, in place of what would have been a really inspiring in-person summer of music making. And we got to hear from some of the faculty members from the festival. They shared with us about their personal experiences growing up in music. They shared some of their favorite recordings, which is always a joy for me to listen to, because nobody's favorite recordings are ever really the same. You can learn so much, and you can learn of music and of performers and musicians that you didn't know of before. So, take advantage of the time where technology is kind of all that we have at the moment. Go on YouTube and find those obscure recordings from like the 1930s or something that you never heard before. Find those artists that you never heard before. And I know that it's easier said than done. But it takes some digging to find that diamond in the rough, and that diamond in the rough, that recording, that artist can be a real spark and a real source of inspiration going forward for, the next day, the next week, the next month. And it all just sort of, one thing leads to the next. And hopefully with our new administration and with our, with all of the new executive orders that are going out, of course, in relation to a number of issues, but in particularly in regards to the COVID vaccination plan, I'm really, really, really hoping that by the time, I don't know if fall 2021 is too hopeful of a goal, but I really hope that by that point we can at least get back to some level, some capacity of in-person interaction and performing. And hopefully we'll only have to figure out how to continue navigating this virtual world, entirely virtual world, for so much longer. I think it'll start to look up from here. So let that sort of be the light at the end of the tunnel for you if you're really struggling right now.
Yes, I feel very hopeful too, Randall. And it has been very inspiring for me to hear from a lot of different students how they have found creative uses for technology, including practice boot camp. They would keep their Zoom on for 4 hours and practice for 50 minutes and take 10-minute breaks together and go back and practice. I've heard all kinds of really fun ways of using this moment as an opportunity, as you suggest. So yeah, really uplifting to hear about. Well, since you speak about recordings, my final question is, would you so kindly tell us about your debut album, which will be coming out this spring?
Sure. Well, this is just another manifestation of why I feel like I'm so lucky and so grateful to be where I am today. Of all the times when an opportunity like this could have arisen, it was during a worldwide pandemic. But I'm so fortunate to have signed an exclusive recording contract with Decca Classics, the recording label in London. And my debut album, which is in the process of being recorded, will be released, I believe, in the early summer of this year, May or June, something like that. And the album really will be an homage, a tribute to a number of Black composers, African-American composers specifically, who in my eyes have paved the way for me to be able to do what I'm doing, despite the infinitely more difficult circumstances in terms of, social justice and equity and inclusion and all of these things that we're still fighting so diligently for. At the time when these composers were alive, Florence Price, William Grant Still, Coleridge Taylor Perkinson even, these were not questions that the general public was asking themselves. I can only imagine that it must have felt like them against the world. And I'm just so grateful for people who have put themselves in a position of struggle and a position that would not necessarily be appreciated by most of the people who would have the chance to hear their music. To put themselves in that position, probably not necessarily even looking forward to the generations to come, but in fact, they did pave the way for myself and other young artists of color to enjoy some degree of success in this field and to be able to find joy in this music. So there are a number of works by Florence Price, Coleridge Taylor Perkinson, William Grant Still, the Mother and Child Suite, which you'll be hearing one movement of in this recording or in this recital. And there were also a couple of works by George Gershwin and Dvorak, who were both really timely advocates for musicians of color and indigenous musicians and music at a time where that was not the cool thing to be doing by any means. So, it's a celebration of voices, composers' voices who may not have had the chance to be heard as much as they should up until this point. And it's also a celebration of those who were in positions of privilege and used those platforms to bring light to these composers and to their music.
I think it's a very exciting program, and we are all going to be looking forward to hearing that debut album when it's completed.
Thank
And
you.
we can't wait for this recital too that you've played for Chesapeake Chamber Music. We're really grateful for your time and your talent, and I'm grateful to have had the chance to speak with you today, Randall, in a slightly different setting than our usual lessons together. And thanks again for speaking with us today.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. I hope you all enjoy the program. You and I had a lot of fun putting it together. We actually, I don't know if this will make it into the final cut, but we actually, we recorded this at 11 p.m. at Skillman Studios. Way, who is the head engineer there, and he runs the studio, was so gracious to make time in a schedule that was totally full in January to allow us to come down to Brooklyn and record at 11 p.m. So this was the latest, by far, the latest recording session I've been a part of. Don't know if I'd necessarily want to do it again, but it was a great experience, and I think somehow it added to the vibe in the room, knowing that it was 1 a.m. outside when we finished. But we had a great time recording it. It's really some beautiful music, and I hope you all enjoy. Thanks so much for having me in this show.
Thanks, Randall. Take care.
Take care.